Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, what impact will the death of Kevin Kamenetz have on the Democratic primary race for governor? As Governor Hogan signs the free tuition bill for Maryland community colleges, who will reap the political benefits? And our panel will profile the Montgomery County executive race and candidate Rose Krasnow. We're joined by the Dean of Democratic Punditry, Sam Statland, Maryland Young Republican National Committeeman, Evan Young, Maryland political consultant and lobbyist, Sean Winkler, and political strategist, Susan Heltemes. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. This past Thursday, mere hours after participating in a candidate forum in Prince George's County, Baltimore County Executive and Democratic Party candidate for governor Kevin Kamenetz died of a heart attack. While the race in the Democratic primary is considered too close to call, Kamenetz was considered one of the top 3 candidates in that race. Sam, what is the immediate impact that Kamenetz's death will have on this race?
Well, first, Casey, I want everybody to know how sorry I am to hear of Kevin's death. He was a truly great guy. I've met him several times, both here locally as well as in Annapolis and in Baltimore County, where as executive, he just did a bang-up job. So my heart goes out to his family, it really does. As far as the race goes, well, first of all, it certainly does open up Baltimore County. I think Baltimore County now becomes a hunting ground for who's left. And I really don't think that Valerie Irvin can recapture the momentum that he had in the county. So I think you'll see more activity from Rashid Baker and from Rich Madalino in the county trying to scarf up those votes. And I think it's going to be a big plus for our gubernatorial candidates in this area.
Susan, Sam touched on this in his answer, but under Maryland law, former Montgomery County Council member and 21 This Week panelist Valerie Irvin, who was Kamenetz's running mate for lieutenant governor, does have the option to carry on his campaign in his place. Will she?
Well, she can either be the lieutenant governor and pick someone to be the governor, or she can pick herself to be governor and choose a lieutenant governor candidate. She has till next Thursday. The reason they have to move so quickly is for ballots to be printed. The assumption at this point is that overseas ballots have to be mailed sooner, and the assumption is going to be that a Kamenetz vote would be an Irvin vote if she were to do it. Valerie is a very ambitious person, and I talked to one of the gubernatorial candidates today, and the sense out in the hustings is that she will indeed do it because the Kamenetz campaign had just purchased 2 weeks worth of advertising and media for the 2 weeks prior to the election. So I think that will come about. If not, the money goes to charities or the state party or a central committee.
Sam, does the fact that Valerie will now be the only woman running in the race, I mean, other than Christiana, who we'll talk about in a moment, and whose candidacy has a cloud over on it, is this going to change the dynamics of the race?
I really don't think so. I think that if Valerie had any traction to begin with, she would have been a candidate on her own, which she isn't. And of course, being second on a ticket is fine, except that everybody looks to who the main candidate is to vote for.
And the other thing is that, she's from Montgomery County. There are other lieutenant governor candidates from Montgomery County, and she wouldn't be the only African-American candidate because there's already Rashid Baker and Ben Jallis. And she is, when you put her up against those in a debate, for instance, she just is not going to rival them.
Who's really, really scrambling as we speak is the state and local board of elections, because if you can imagine, they have to redesign all of the ballots. It's just not a matter of pulling a name off. You have to add, you have to subtract, you have to realign the ballots, And the Montgomery County ballot in itself is 16 pages.
And it's 77 versions.
Well, I want to go.
So it's a big job.
Well,
for them.
I mean, with the election, I mean, early voting starts in a month. So I mean,
Well, and the overseas, as you mentioned,
And
goes
I
out
might
quicker.
add, I might note that Kamenetz's campaign has $2 million.
all right, Sean. There are reports that the Democratic candidate Christiana Virnaja declared that she was a D.C. resident in 2014 on her application for a wedding license. Will this finally put an end to her vanity campaign for governor?
Well, Casey, Chris has already proven that she pays no attention to the Maryland Constitution, right, which says you must be a resident of the state and a registered voter for the past 5 years preceding an election. So, Casey, for my little birdies at the State Board of Elections, no one's going to tackle this issue until there's a challenge brought by a citizen of the state. So right here, right now, Casey Aiken, will you represent us in a challenge to get her off the ballot?
You know, no, and I'll tell you why. Because she doesn't have a snowball's chance of winning in this competitive.
And you're not going to see any kind of a challenge unless she's
Competitive.
really
The legal
close.
fight would last longer than the amount of time she has left in her campaign. It ends in June because she's going to finish near the bottom. So
Well,
So no matter what, she's
but
won the PR
on the
war.
off,
But
on
you-
the off chance that she does win the primary, then you can file the complaint.
Well,
Casey,
and
Then
you
can
know
try
what's
the complaint.
interesting? These challenges do come through because if you'll recall, Tom Perez wanted to
Absolutely.
run for
With
Attorney
Gansler.
General, and he had not been a lawyer long enough in Maryland, so he was considered unqualified. So if someone does come forward, we'll see what
He was
happens.
a lawyer?
He is a lawyer.
Oh, amazing. Evan, is there going to be an impact to Governor Hogan from Kamenetz's death? I hate being ghoulish about this, but I mean, we got to talk about the political realities.
yeah, potentially. I mean, it ensures that whoever he faces now, he'll be more competitive in Baltimore County. No one else that he might face in the general election now in November will have as strong of a hold on Baltimore County as Kamenetz would. He won't be facing the Baltimore County executive. So that very important county, very important part of Maryland, makes it much more competitive, much more available for him now.
And a county that is purple at best.
Yes.
You
And
know,
so for a
Yes.
very middle of the road, moderate governor, and Governor Hogan, it makes it even more competitive than it would have been. Hypothetical because he might have been facing Ben Jealous or Sherman Baker anyway, but this just ensures, I'm sure for the Hogan team now, they know in November they will be more competitive than they may have been
All right.
before.
So as we go on to our next topic, I'm going to poll the panel. Who's going to benefit the most from the supporters that were Kevin Kamenetz? Sam,
Sheet Baker.
Evan.
Larry Hogan.
Jim Shea, he's run a heavy Baltimore-centric campaign to this point, is a Baltimore County resident. He has an awesome young councilman, Brandon Scott, on the city side of that ticket. I think that region is his.
Susan.
Alec Ross is also from Baltimore. So I
Wrap
think
it up.
Jim Shea, and the thing about Jim Shea, though, is that he has the gravitas and the maturity on his side. So you might be right there.
And the money.
All right, we'll go into our next topic. Governor Hogan this past week took the opportunity to sign the very popular law passed by the General Assembly, which provides tuition to community college to in-state students. Sean, the law is designed to help low and middle income students who qualify academically. Who's going to get credit for this legislation?
The pen that signs the legislation tends to get credit for the legislation. We've seen that from all the way up to national politics down to the local level here in Montgomery County. You know, so far on these issues, whether it was sick leave, now we're seeing community college tuition, Hogan has basically taken these proposals, put a little moderate twist on them, and continues to out-message Democrats on these issues.
Susan, also signed by Governor Hogan were changes in the sexual harassment policies in the State House. Delegate Angela Angel from Prince George's County thinks there are still many lawmakers who are engaged in harassment who are still in office. So is this bill going to have an impact?
I think it's too early to think about it. This doesn't really do that much. Ariana Kelly is the author from right here in Montgomery County, and I commend her for getting the conversation started. All it does right now is set up an independent investigator into this. So this really is a nothing burger right now. There is a long ways to go on this, and I think this is not enough to really make a difference. I think there's more to be determined in the years ahead. But I want to go back to the tuition bill for a bit. You have to have a 2.3 grade average. If you are with a single parent, your parent has to make $100,000 or less. If you have two parents, $150,000 less or less. And the good thing about this is they've put a pot of $2 million aside for people, adults, older people who have like a credit or two to finish. And this is really good for people who might be struggling with a family and everything. So I think all around this is a good thing. And Senator Pinsky from Prince George's had struggled for 2 years to get this through. And I certainly hope that he gets a good part of the credit, because he's the one who has really been pushing this and deserves a lot of credit for
And traditionally, it's always been a Democratic issue.
It has.
Pushed by Democrats.
Yeah.
Even though you have a
I think the
Republican
only
signing the bill.
issue is whether or not there should have been a means testing to make this solely available to moderate and
Well, that's
low-income
what
kids.
this is, the means test.
Well, if the purpose is to have a more educated population in Montgomery County, why not make it available to every Montgomery County or every Maryland student who qualifies academically?
Okay, Casey, we're talking about money. You who are always the fox watching the chicken coop about stupid spending, how dare you say that?
Why?
I mean,
Well,
because if it had been everybody, oh, goddamn Democrats spending money again.
Susan,
well, this is
Susan,
a
you're
realistic approach.
reading tea leaves again.
No, Joe, you don't listen to yourself. That's
Pretending.
the
Casey,
problem.
the
No,
median income-
the real issue is why not make it open and fair to everybody?
It is open and
It is
fair. to
open
No,
every-
it's not.
fair.
Look,
It's not.
Casey, the
If-
median
if
income
a
in the county is
taxpayer- if a
$75,000.
taxpayer who makes more than $100,000
$75,000 median
taxpayer-
income.
So, and if I'm a taxpayer,
They're going to qualify.
and I make more than $75,000 a year, why should I be penalized?
You and your lovely
You've got
wife.
to 100.
You and your lovely wife Nancy
I'm
would
gonna-
have
I'm
to
gonna-
make
I'm gonna let Evan
150.
jump in on this.
I just don't like the way any of these kinds of bills are structured. So what this is
sounds
saying,
like more like you of the past.
what this is saying is that, so if you two-parent house makes $150,000, they'll cover your costs at
Or
Montgomery
less
College.
than 150 or less.
So the family making $149,000 does not have to come up with that $5,000 from Montgomery County. Family making $151,000 though apparently has an extra $5,000 that the family making $1,000 less didn't have. It shouldn't just be cut off, if this even exists, it shouldn't be cut off at one income level. It should be graduated.
But you
because
know what? When Bernie Sanders was going around saying that last year that we should have free community college education, Elizabeth Warren and a whole lot of other people, the Republicans on this
I didn't
panel
say I
are-
like this. I'm saying if it exists, it should be graduated, not just cut off at a certain dollar
Oh,
figure.
and how's that going to get paid for then?
It would be terrible still, but I'm saying it would be less
There's
terrible
got to
than
be a
just cut it.
start, and I think this
Yeah.
is a good start.
If you're making $100,000, you generally know
single
when your
parent.
kid might turn 18.
Well, Susan, I am
save
so
for
glad
18
you're
years.
passionate about this issue, and I'm so glad
Prepare.
you know.
I was
Plan.
a community college
Be
librarian.
And I'm so glad
I was a
that you
community
know
college
exactly how I feel about
And
it.
nobody subsidized me to go to the school.
And it should
Well,
be
I
at
think
least
that's-
15
somebody
credits,
has a
not 12.
chance.
No one did
I might have
subsidize you.
finished college before
But
age
again,
65.
why should
55.
people be excluded? Make it available to everybody.
I think at that level, it does make it
When we
available
come
to
back
most
from
families in Montgomery
we're not
County.
going to solve this now, but when we come back from this short break, we're going to talk about Rose Krasnow, who's the only woman running for county executive. Is there a pathway for her election? Stay tuned. And welcome back. With only 1 month before early voting begins, we are going to take a close look at the 6 Democratic candidates running to succeed outgoing county executive Isaiah Leggett. Vying for the opportunity to follow the popular and successful county executive are 3 members of the county council, the current House Majority Leader, a healthcare executive, and a former mayor of Rockville. Sam, there's a lot of speculation going on as to the mood of the electorate going into this primary, principally because of the passage of the term limits bill in 2016 and the fact that Ike Leggett, who's dominated the Montgomery County political scene for so long, is no longer running for office. We're going to focus tonight on Rose Krasnow, who's the only woman running in the election. What do you think of her election effort?
I think Rose has done very, very well. I think that actually she's number 2 or number 3 on the list behind the outsider of the incumbents, who is Mark Elrich, who's been the only outsider for years and years and years. And who will not be tainted by the.
You can't even say that with a
By the-
straight face.
This one's laughing.
You can't say it
Because
with
of
a
the
straight
voters.
face. Tainted.
Mark, he's my man. If
Oh,
he can't do
my
it, no one
gosh.
can.
You
And
know-
those will place a nice second down.
You know, Sam,
Dream
the
on.
problem
Alice.
that the
Sam
three
will be a
candidates who
picker
are
by
from
November.
the county council have
No way.
is that there's a lot of dissatisfaction in the electorate because of their positions in the past. That's why we had a term limits bill. Susan, former county council member Steve Silverman believes that Mrs. Krasnow has a lane to victory in this crowded field. What's your assessment?
You touch on something that I think will make a difference. The three county council people were ousted because of the term limits. And I think that will have a negative impact on them. Mrs. Krasnow came into the race in December and has been going gangbusters and is gaining strength. And I am now hearing out in the hustings in Democratic circles that people who supported one of those three people, one of the council people, are let me finish, Sam, are beginning to reassess that vote, thinking they want to be with a winner. And slowly people are migrating over. And if we're talking about Rose, she has a most interesting background. She grew up in Tennessee, was there at the time that Martin Luther King was shot. She was with a liberal family in a city. They were in the heart of the civil rights movement. She worked in New York as a bond trader for a couple of years, which is really good experience when you're thinking about running a government the size of Montgomery County. She was an executive as the mayor of Rockville, and during that time, the town center came about. They annexed King Farm. She has worked at Park and Planning and has had a leadership role there. She knows the county probably as well as anyone, having worked on plans for parks and planning over the whole county. She's articulate, a hard worker. She's known as being collegial, and I think she has a great opportunity. She doesn't talk about the fact she's an only woman in the race, but I think in a year where there has been, the Me Too movement, maybe it'll make a difference. I wouldn't say one way or another.
Well, the real issue in any multi-candidate race is how badly will everybody cannibalize each other, particularly the candidates that are coming from Silver Spring, drawing from each other.
Nobody's cannibalizing
No,
anybody.
nobody's bad-mouthing anybody.
No, I don't mean
At any debate
cannibalize
you've
in
been
the
to,
sense that you're
everybody
bad-mouthing,
has been very
is you
cordial
draw
and
from
very
each
nice.
other's base.
The biggest advantage for the candidate in the primary, which is a Democratic primary, is the vote getter inside the Beltway. Mark has that advantage. I don't think anybody's going to catch him.
Nearly half of the voters are undecided, Sam. That is the difference. And I think people are beginning to, this is what I'm hearing, beginning to assess Mark. One, Mark is a socialist and has a photo of Che Guevara in his office. He doesn't ever salute the flag. He doesn't do the Pledge of Allegiance. People are concerned about that. He has never been the president of the county council in all those years.
It's because he's always been an outsider,
Yes.
not willing to take
Okay.
money from developers,
No.
not willing to kowtow to everyone
Let
that
me
comes
finish
along,
why he's
and will
nev-
listen to people on a given position
Sam-
and make a decision. He's the best qualified candidate.
He has said he didn't ever want to be the president of the council because he didn't want to follow the lead of anyone else. He didn't want to have to speak on behalf of the whole council, and he wants to do his own thing.
So
I
he wants to speak for the citizens of Montgomery County, which is why he's going to win.
Well, we
He's
have a
not-
socialist and we have a financial manipulator as candidates. So are we ready for the
I
jawline
don't-
of Bill Frick?
I don't-
Because I see a moderate lane here in the Democratic Party as people are racing to the left. Talk about an inside the Beltway vote getter. Bethesda is a heck of a base.
And Roger Berliner is there, and Roger Berliner will out-Trump, I hate to use that word, will out-Trump Bill Frick. Bill Frick, while he was in the legislature, is only known at one thing, and I said that the other week. He was known as the candidate who tried to squelch the tax break for the House of Cards. It's kind of a joke in Annapolis. Bill Frick is limited. In fact, I saw him last Sunday at the Democratic brunch, and he came over and he said, Susan, are there any undecided people here in this room in my race? And I said, there's one guy way over the corner who looks like he's lost, but
Well, Bill Frick was the majority leader, right? So he must have some respect from his colleagues. So before we throw him under the bus, I think he has a real proposal for the county budget. I think he's a strong voice in this race.
You can't discount the fact that he's been elected from a district for
But it's
for 10 years.
But it's a subsection of the area that Roger Berliner is a part of.
Familiarity can breed contempt, Susan. It's not necessarily that everybody in Bethesda and Potomac are going to vote for Roger.
Nobody
Berliner.
has the
I see more
of
signs.
Mark Elrich throughout the county.
But
no one.
But you know what is also interesting about Rose, though, is she is working up county. She's going to other people. I don't.
Well, we're going to have lots of time because every week up until the primary season starts, we're going to focus on one candidate each week.
When are we doing Robin Ficker?
We will do that after the primary since he's unopposed,
okay.
Susan.
That makes
Stay tuned for parting shots when we come back from the short break. And welcome back. Now with parting shots, Evan Young.
So John McCain, he's in the process of planning his funeral and recently came out and said that while he wanted President Obama to come to his funeral, he didn't want President Trump there. Unfortunately, there are some talking head Republicans that I've seen on the internet and on television try to say that means something about John McCain and that it means something negative about him. Just a friendly reminder for people who shouldn't have to be reminded because we're adults. It is entirely possible to have good relationships and friendships and care about people that you disagree with on everything politically. So if John McCain and Barack Obama happen to have a good relationship because they ran against each other and had it out, that doesn't say anything about John McCain. It says something about the fact that they're both mature adults.
Thank you, Evan. Sam Statland, your parting shot.
Well, again, deep sorrow goes out to Kamenetz's family. I really feel badly about that, and I hope they recover well. The good news here in Montgomery County, since we abut the District of Columbia, is that the Capitals have a really good path to win the Stanley Cup. Go Caps.
Thank you, Sam. Susan Heltemes, your parting shot.
Today I read an interesting article on HuffPost about celebrity moms, and they're talking about being a mother can be hell, but it's their hell. And so this weekend is Mother's Day. So I want to wish all the mothers out there a very happy Mother's Day. And for those of us who don't have a mom, think of your mom. At this time of year, I always think about my mother. And when I was a teenager, and I probably wasn't the perfect teenager, my parents were having an argument over lunch, and they were making points back and forth. And I was a great baseball fan, and I said, okay, the score is now tied 1-1. At which point, my mother kicked me out of the house and said, I'll let you know when you can come back in. My dad came out and laughed at me, and he said, oh, she'll get over it. And she did. Eventually, I got fed again, and we got along for decades afterwards. So for moms, some of us are kind of recalcitrant, but we couldn't make it without you. So to my mom and all the moms, happy Mother's Day.
Thank you, Susan. Sean Winkler, your parting shot.
Well, let me echo many of those great things about the Capitals and mothers all around the world. And I would also like to express my condolences to the Kamenetz family as well, as that was an absolutely tragic moment in recent political and personal history, quite frankly, in the state of Maryland. But before we get any further with that, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Montgomery's own Senator Chris Van Hollen. We actually saw the Republicans nominate a normal candidate in West Virginia on Tuesday to take on incumbent Senator Joe Manchin. And I think the Senate Democrats are in a strong position with Chris Van Hollen leading their re-election effort, but he will be tested.
Thank you, Sean. And I just want to say that for those who think that these political races don't count, all you have to do is look and go down Rockville Pike to the Marriott Conference Center and think about the leadership that we had from Doug Duncan, who oversaw the building of the Marriott Conference Center. I am overwhelmed every time I go there and see the vast number of people and the vast usage of that conference center. So people, your vote counts. The county executive who will lead this county also will count. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken. Thank you to the panel. Thank you to the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show.